Hi, welcome to my channel. It's Marty Braden again. I thought a topic like, is murder just a law of nature, would get people's attention. Isn't curiosity wonderful? If this is your first time watching one of my videos, let me quickly explain what my channel is all about. By doing so, I think it'll help you understand why I cover the topics I do. Keep in mind that I'm not a professional YouTuber, which is why you don't see any fancy high-techy production stuff going on in my videos. But that being said, I'm confident you'll find them to be quite informative and even interesting. All of my video topics come from a book I wrote titled An Atheist Delusion. It's my Latter-day Saint perspective on Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. As you probably know, Richard's an atheist evolutionary biologist. He said that his purpose for writing his book was to make atheists out of all of us. Anyway, after I published An Atheist Delusion, I decided to set up this YouTube channel and record and post short videos reviewing every single anti-God argument Dawkins puts forth in his book. So far, I've posted 98 videos in my series of videos. This video you're watching right now is part 99 in my series, and so let's pick it up where I left off last time. Let me go right to that. It's the new and last subtitle in chapter 6. It's If There's No God, Then Why Be Good? Richard starts this subtitle by expressing what he often feels tempted to do when he's asked, if there's no God, Richard, then why be good? Richard chooses to challenge his questioners by asking them, do you really mean to tell me the only reason you try to be good is to gain God's approval and rewards or to avoid his disapproval and punishment? That's not morality, he says. It's just sucking up, apple polishing, and looking over your shoulder at that great surveillance camera in the sky or the small wiretap inside your head, end quote. Richard, do you mean by wiretap life's recorder, which is our spirit's memory, writing everything on our spirit's mind and heart? If so, then yes. I'm being sarcastic here, of course, but let me ask the question, why do you even have a memory? Why can't we just live without having to remember everything we do or everything we see and speak? Why is everything we ever do from a tiny child up until we die recorded in our mind's memory? Are our memories only there to help us to survive, and that's it? I would remind you that all memories are not about survival and surviving alone, and that's a fact. Richard goes on to quote Dostoevsky and the words he put into the mouth of Ivan Karamazov. He also quotes Steven Pinker's Blank Slate report of a police strike in Montreal and H.L. Menskin's criticism of it. Here's what he said to all these public cultural critics. Quote, people say we need religion when what they really need is we need police, end quote. Richard continues, it would be interesting to know whether there was any statistical tendency, however slight, for religious believers to loot and destroy less than unbelievers. Richard is inclined to believe that, quote, the prison population of atheists is very low, and some atheists, being more highly educated and having greater intelligence than others, like himself, of course. Richard's mind is truly biased towards his fellow intellectuals, isn't it? Once again, he aggrandizes himself and other atheists because of their so-called imminent intelligence, saying it may be the reason they are more restrained from committing crimes. In other words, they're too smart to crime or to sin. That's so funny to me. To support this idea, he says research evidence doesn't support the common view that religiosity is positively correlated with morality. Contrary to Richard's belief, I believe that if one were to do a survey of all prisoners in all the prisons throughout the world and ask them, do you believe in God? The majority of these prisoners would probably say no. But not all, of course, but most would. But I guess we'll never know unless and until such a survey is taken, will we? Next, Richard quotes fellow atheist Sam Harris, who gives a list of statistics that implies more crime is committed in red states than in blue states. And then Richard concludes by saying that systematic research, if anything, tends to support such correlation data, end quote. And quoting Gregory S. Paul from the Journal of Religion and Society, who systematically compared 17 economically developed nations and reached the devastating conclusion that, quote, higher rates of belief in and worship of a creator correlated with higher rates of homicide, juvenile and early mortality, STD infection rates, teen pregnancy and abortion in the prosperous democracies, end quote. After reading these statements by Sam Harris, as well as Richard's and Mr. Paul's statements, I decided to do a Google search, and the very first article that popped up on my screen, which was at the top of the page list of articles, was an article titled, Do Red States Report Higher Rates of Violent Crime Than Blue States? It was written on Thursday, June 24th of 2021 by a Mr. Stevie Rossignol Cortez. Here's what it said. Be sure to read the entire article to its very end to get a sense what I'm talking about. Quote, according to 2019 FBI data, 7 out of 10 states with the highest per capita rates of violent crime voted Republican in the 2020 election. In contrast, 7 out of the 10 states with the lowest rates voted Democrat. However, and here's the chief point I want to bring to this discussion, the District of Columbia had the highest rate despite voting blue. The FBI cautions against using any one of demographic markers to draw conclusions about the causes of crime, which they describe as manifold, complex, and often not readily measurable. Cited variables include population density and transience, poverty, education levels, racial and ethnic makeup, family cohesiveness, strength of law enforcement, youth concentration, and climate. Statistics are further complicated by the fact that higher crime rates may reflect greater reporting rather than a higher incidence of crime. In other words, maybe blue states hide such statistics. Maybe? Who knows? End of an article. Okay, that's the end of the article. It is obvious that one can go a bit overboard in trying to make their point. By overboard, I mean blurring the line by conflating the facts in order to try and convince someone of your point of view. That's called gaslighting. I don't want to judge Sam or Richard here, but it does appear that Sam was imbalanced in his use of his statistical claims. I'll leave it there and let you decide what to believe. Richard's beef with God is found in his statement regarding morality, wherein he says, quote, even if it were true that we need God to be moral, it would, of course, not make God's existence more likely, merely more desirable. But that is not the issue here, end quote. My point exactly, Richard. All the answers Richard has put forth to try and answer why religion is here do in fact lead me to feel an increased confidence in God's existence and a greater hope for those who love him. And for those who have chosen darkness rather than light, I feel an increased hope that your consciousness will be raised once you've learned that your choices are being recorded by your own spirit's movie recorder. Your mind, which recorded content, that recorded content will be reviewed after you die during what I've been calling your end-of-life review. Next, Richard goes on to give an analogy of an imaginary apologist. Richard shares with his readers what he thought his imaginary apologist would say regarding the question of, where does good come from? It being, once again, just his opinion put upon his imaginary apologist like a ventriloquist speaking for the puppet. Here's what Richard said this imaginary apologist would answer. My imaginary religious apologist has no need to admit that sucking up to God is the religious motive to be good. Rather, his claim is that wherever the motive to be good comes from, without God there would be no standard for deciding what is good. In other words, no objective standard, in other words. My religious apologist would claim that only religion can provide a basis for deciding what is good. The springboard for this discussion of moral philosophy was a hypothetical religious claim that without a God, morals are relative, in other words, subjectively relative, and arbitrary. Men such as Kant and other sophisticated moral philosophers apart, and with due recognition given to patriotic fervor, the preferred source of absolute morality is usually a holy book of some kind, end quote. Again, Richard reveals his lack of understanding as to why believers like myself are motivated to try and do their best to keep God's commandments. Good, by the way, is not the objective here, as there are only 2 persons that I know of that are and can be called good. Or as Jesus said, be ye therefore perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect. And then, after Jesus was resurrected, he included himself by saying, even as I or your Father in heaven is perfect, which is another way of saying is good or complete. The motive to be good is not to suck up to God, Richard. It is to love God, just as children are motivated to show that they love their parents because their parents love them first. Is loving one's parents just sucking up to them? I think not. Jesus counseled his disciples on this principle of love when he said in John 14:15, if ye love me, keep my commandments. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland taught, quote, so we have neighbors to bless, children to protect, the poor to lift up, the truth to defend. We have wrongs to make right, truths to share, and good to do. In short, we have a life of devoted discipleship to give in demonstrating our love for the Lord. This isn't sucking up to God, Richard. It's loving God for the wonderful gifts that he's given us. We can't quit and we won't go back, Elder Holland says, after an encounter with the living Son of the living God. Nothing is ever again to be as it was before. End quote. Having experienced love, this love of the Savior, I so agree and testify that that is so true. You never go back to where you were before. In response to Richard's comments on moral philosophy and where he feels our moral sense comes from, and in particular his belief that absolute morality comes from what is written in one's holy books and therefore is man-made, I want to share an article I read recently written by Ryan Leisure, an apologist with the Cross-Examined organization. Its title is, Can We Be Good Without God? I think you, my readers and my viewers, will find it very enlightening. I took the liberty of inserting a few short comments of my own intermittently throughout Ryan's article. I put them in parentheses, and I like to, that's what I've done a lot through all the articles throughout my book, so that you would know who was saying what and when. My comments are those in parentheses, and I'll make a point in this video when I'm speaking. Here's Ryan's article, and I quote, "This past weekend, 2 mass-scale shootings transpired on American soil, El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. Many experienced unspeakable carnage. 2 men, fueled by hatred for mankind, slaughtered dozens of innocent people in cold blood. In response, people of all stripes spoke out against these atrocities. Men and women, Democrat and Republican, Christian and atheist, all condemned these crimes. In other words, the denunciation of these senseless and cowardly acts has been universal. But doesn't this universal agreement fly in the face of our relativistic cultural values? Don't force your morality on others suddenly doesn't sound so appealing in situations like this. Don't we all want everyone else to adopt our same moral position on murder? This, of course, raises important questions. Does objective morality exist? That is, were those 2 men objectively wrong in what they did over the weekend? And if so, where does this agreed upon morality come from? Relativists argue that there is no such thing as objective morality. Rather, morality is subjective, dependent on individual opinions. So, in situations like these mass shootings, the relativists cannot say that the shooters were wrong. If so, that would imply that an objective standard exists that these 2 individuals missed. Rather, the relativists can only say they didn't care for these events. They found them distasteful. Murder is wrong and rape is evil are just opinions on par with pepperoni is better than sausage. I thought about doing that kind of a little thumbnail for the video, but people, I wouldn't have gotten it. But because I knew what I was going to talk about, I would get it. But isn't it self-evident that mass murder is in a different category than pizza toppings? The very fact that society has universally condemned these acts ought to tip us off that something more than mere opinion is at work here. When we all cry foul in unison, we're implicitly affirming that fair exists. C.S. Lewis made this argument years ago when he wrote, just and unjust. A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of what a straight line is. What was I comparing this universe to when I called it unjust is the question you should ask. What Lewis and so many others have argued in this objective morality is that it exists, and this is most evident when people don't live up to that moral standard. If we learn, for example, that a man raped a little girl, brutally murdered her, and dismembered her body, would we say that he committed evil? If yes, then we recognize an objective moral standard exists that was not met. Our senses, our conscience, or the light of Christ, that's my wording, tell us that acts such as abuse, rape, theft, deceit, murder, and so forth, all fail to measure up to an objective standard of some sort. This moral standard seems to patently obvious to us. It's odd when people try to deny it. A quick rule of thumb is that when a certain group can't condemn the Holocaust as evil, we conclude that their views are absurd. Of course, if those same relativists had been in those concentration camps themselves, they'd drop the relativism and recognize evil for what it is. Even the most committed relativist will come around if you steal his wallet or spread false rumors about him or her. Phrases like, that's not right, or that's not fair, will come spewing out faster than you can blink your eye. Where does objective morality come from then? The reality of objective morality raises a significant question. Where does it come from? For the naturalists, and that's those people that believe the natural world is all that there is that exists, these objective morals are mere illusionary byproducts of evolution and social conditioning, constructing, just as Richard has said. For most naturalists, science is the only begetter of knowledge, but science itself is amoral. Science cannot tell us how things ought to be. It can only tell us how things are. That is, science can tell us how to make chemical weapons, but it cannot tell us whether we should use them. Objective morals simply cannot derive from something morally neutral like science, and they certainly don't arise from Darwinian evolution. According to Darwinists, like Richard Dawkins, people only do good because it aids in their survival. But if that's the case, can we really call their actions morally good? Fundamentally, the motivation behind good acts is self-serving and thus not worthy of praise. Interesting thought. Also, doesn't Darwinism on the whole make morality arbitrary, based on random choices or personal whim rather than on any reason or system? Couldn't the human race have found rape or killing each other for food acceptable if it would have evolved like other species from the natural kingdom? Sharks and lions do this all the time, thus my thumbnail on my video. They all murder for sustenance and to keep alive and to stay and continue on with their life cycle. Are they immoral? Darwinists who find this notion uncomfortable typically adopt humanism, the belief that humans are the center of the universe and morality is based on what helps them flourish. But again, isn't humanism purely arbitrary in a Darwinian world? Darwin, after all, taught that every living species descended from the same common ancestor in the primordial soup. Thus, humans are simply one small branch on his tree of life. In other words, this is my words, humans are nothing special. There's no image of God here, in other words. Continuing on with the author. Other branches include crickets, lions, fungus, and every other living species. Why should we think the human branch is the most valuable? Why are we more important than crickets? Doesn't this make us guilty of speciesism? Ultimately, atheism's understanding of morality is purely arbitrary. It simply cannot account for objective morality. In the end, God's law, and this is my words, and his gift of the light of Christ or conscience given to all of us, even atheists, is the best explanation for objective morality. In my words again, which moral code is contained in his law that's written on our hearts. God's very nature grounds morality so that anything done that goes against his divine character is wrong and or evil. Furthermore, because God made humans in his image, each person possessing intrinsic value, my words, humans are his special creation because of his unique value. God created us in his very image, is proof that we are special. At least we are to him. That's the end of my comments. Picking up again. Without a doubt, the first objective raised to the claim that objective morality doesn't exist without God is that atheists do good without believing in God. But this misses the point. Of course, people can still do good things without believing in God. All are given that freedom of choice to follow the law written on our hearts. That's my words. The moral agency to do good or not, to believe there's sin or to believe there's no sin. End of my points. The question is not, do we have to believe in God to be good? But rather the question is, if God doesn't exist, is anything objectively good at all? As I've argued, moral categories are arbitrary in an atheistic world. If we acknowledge, however, that the two mass shooters committed evil, then objective moral categories exist. And if objective moral categories exist, then a transcendental lawgiver is the best and the more probable explanation for why we all feel the way about it. Which leads to the second objection, the euthyphro dilemma. The dilemma goes like this. Is something good because God wills it? Or does God will something because it's good? Skeptics raise this objection to put the theist between a rock and a hard place. For if we say something is good because God wills it, then good is ultimately arbitrary. But if we say God wills something because it's good, then the objective standards exist beyond God and outside of God. But the skeptic presents us with a false dilemma here. A third option, a third opinion, exists which states God wills something because he is good. That is to say, he is the standard by which we get all moral categories. In other words, he is the personification of all that is good in the universe. Another frequent objection is that we don't need the Bible to know that we shouldn't murder or steal. After all, other religious books tell us the same as do most legal codes. But again, this is not the argument theists make. Nobody's arguing you need to read the Bible to know what is right from wrong. Nobody's saying that. I'm certainly not saying that. Our conscience provides that for us, I believe. Rather, we're arguing that objective right and wrong doesn't exist in a world without a transcendent moral law. But the very fact that every world religion and legal code agrees on basic fundamental morals, universally, ubiquitously, and that suggests that a moral law exists that transcends the human race. The Apostle Paul tells us in Romans 2, verses 14 and 15, "For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves, which showeth the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or convicting or else excusing one another." End quote of Paul. So, when Gentiles who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are a law unto themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or excuse them. This is me speaking. Isn't it incredible that so-called peasants, as Richard calls these ancient apostles and prophets, living more than 2,000 years ago, were so well informed about human psychology? Man, this is to say, the author continues, people don't need the Bible to know right from wrong. God has instilled this moral code in the hearts of all people via the light of Christ, our conscience, as I've been saying all along. This is me saying, this to me is the greatest proof there is of God's existence, besides the universe he created. This raises a final objection. If a moral law exists, why is there so much disagreement on morality? There's a little quote I put in here, a little asterisk. Disagreements certainly exist around issues like abortion and sexuality, for example. But does that imply that no right view exists? Of course it doesn't. This is why we strive to make our views accepted by others. Now, I continue. I encourage you to take a look at another YouTube video titled, "This Turned Him from Friendly to Furious in a Second." It's where Ray Comfort asks multiple individual questions about abortion. These are perfect strangers. Please note that I do not agree with everything Ray Comfort says or teaches in his evangelizing videos. I am just using the dialogue he has with these interviewees to point out the two very different points of view they seem to fall into. First is the objective standard stance that says abortion is killing a person and thou shalt not kill. Then there's the subjective standard that says a woman has the right and control over her own body and its health, and that a fetus is not a human until it is born. It's so interesting to me how people contradict themselves when rationalizing their choices. You will see this in a living color as you watch this short video. It's fascinating. Continuing, in fact, if culture adopts our views, we'll say things like our culture is progressing. Progressing toward what, though? The moral standard we believe to be right. Be that as it may, the human race generally agrees on several basic points. People have certain rights. We should treat others with respect. Love is better than hate. Honesty is better than deceit. Courage is better than cowardice, and so forth. As C.S. Lewis aptly stated, quote, think of a country where people were admired for running away in battle, or where a man felt proud of double-crossing all of the people who had taken kindness to him. You might just as well try to imagine a country where 2 and 2 made 5. The universal agreement on the most basic moral category suggests a transcendent moral law, the moral argument for God. This is me speaking. As I've said, I believe that objective morality is one of the strongest arguments for God's existence. I have taught that the most convincing proof for God's existence lies behind our own belt buckles, meaning inside each of us, which seems to be the last place anybody would look. Perhaps a more helpful way of looking at it would be this syllogism. Now this is the author again. If God does not exist, objective morality does not exist. Number 2, objective morality does exist. So number 3, therefore God exists. This argument is logically airtight. If premises 1 and 2 are true, then 3 necessarily follows. I've made a case for 1 and 2 in this article, he says. It concludes then that God exists. So can we be good without God? No, because if he doesn't exist, nothing objectively good exists either. End of the article by Ryan Leisure. The key here is to understand that the world is coming from a secular man's law foundation out of which emerges beliefs such as abortion, transgenderism, the gay lifestyle, etc. Theists, like me, are coming from a God's law foundation, out of which emerge beliefs such as the sanctity of life, marriage between a man and woman only, the law of chastity, and so forth. These two ideologies, these two worldviews are in opposition to each other. That is for sure. It truly is Satan's plan against God, our Heavenly Father's plan. It is a war of ideologies that began way back in our premortal life, and it has continued to take place here and grow and in strength and conflict on this earth. Like the war in heaven, the same war is continuing, as I said, to grow in intensity. The middle ground is being taken away from all of us. The next chapter is titled The Good Book and the Moral Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist? I don't know how to pronounce that. This was a very interesting read for me, and it's going to be a fun video to do. But until next time, take a moment to share your thoughts. Take a moment to make a comment here and there. I'd love to reply to them. Share your thoughts or questions that you have. Like I said, as quickly as I can get to them, I'll respond and we can continue on. But until next time, I want to wish you continued success. Goodbye.